Hello, and welcome to week one of CRIM 340. This is the courts and sentencing class. And since this is week one, I want to give a little bit of an overview of what to expect, as well as some of the material in chapters one and two. Now, these weekly lectures that I'll be uploading, it's not going to replace the reading, and it's definitely not going to cover all of the material in the chapters that we cover, but maybe give you some practical application or just kind of hopefully bring some of that information to life as opposed to just being in the book. So with that being said, let me start off with the book. I have it here. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. This is what your book should look like. It is Courts and Criminal Justice in America. Make sure it is one by Siegel, Smallinger, and that is the correct, should be a third edition that we're using currently. So let's start off with talking about courts. Obviously, in general, in America, we have two different types of courts. We have criminal courts and civil courts. This course will probably cover far more of the criminal aspect than the civil aspect because it is a courts and sentencing class. But we do need to have some sort of familiarity with the civil side of things and understand why do we have civil courts if we have criminal courts. So criminal courts, they focus on punishing offenders. If somebody breaks the rules that we've set in society, then criminal courts will facilitate some sort of punishment for that. Uh, when it comes to civil courts, that's more about the person who has been wronged. What would be the equivalent of a victim in a criminal court case? A plaintiff in the civil case is somebody who has something done to them and they need to have that fixed as opposed to per se punishing the person that did that. A good example would be, say, your neighbor's dog gets out of their backyard and bites your child. Now you have to take your child to the hospital. You have to pay for some hospital bills, pay for some doctor bills. There's some medical attention that's going to cost you money. Is it your fault that your neighbor's dog bit your child? No, you shouldn't have to pay for those medical bills. Your neighbor should pay for those medical bills. And if your neighbor doesn't volunteer that, then in theory, you could take them to civil court and they could make you whole for the expenses that you had. So a criminal case would be something along the lines of if somebody steals from you, the criminal case is going to be handled on the criminal side, and the offender that stole from you is going to be punished in some way, going to be given a jail sentence, going to be given a fine, something along those lines. But fines don't go in your pocket. Fines go in the government's pocket. So civil cases will make sure that the money that you are out goes into your pocket. Now, sometimes those two overlap. Sometimes, an example of that would be a DUI driver. If a DUI driver crashes into somebody, hurts them, now you've got a car that needs to be replaced. That's going to cost money. Medical bills, again, that's going to cost money. And there's a crime. Driving under the influence of alcohol is a crime. So the police are going to come, and in theory, they're going to arrest that DUI driver and put them in jail. The police aren't going to come and write the other driver a check for what it's going to take to replace their car. They're not going to write them a check for the medical bills. Now, they may have some insurance, but that's between them and their insurance. Who's going to pay all those bills? Well, that's where the civil side of things comes. The civil side of things says that if that other driver were to sue the DUI driver, they could sue them for the cost of the medical bills. They could sue them for the cost of the doctor bills. They could sue them for the cost of not being able to go to work anymore while they're recovering. All kinds of things. Whatever it takes that whatever loss they have, whatever damage they have, which is the civil term, damages, whatever damages they have can be taken care of through civil action. So there's our difference between a civil case and a criminal case. But where do we get our court system in general? That's something that we need to go way, way back. Like most things when it comes to criminal justice, or most things when it comes to America, we get a lot of our historical foundations from Old England. Uh, Back in the Old English days, the days of common law, which was just essentially the way the law was handled and the way courts were handled were the way that customs said they should be handled. There wasn't always something written down. Judges and even some law enforcers just handled things the way the community wanted them to be handled customarily. Well, that's not always the most efficient. way to do things. So as judges started handing down decisions, eventually they started writing down those decisions. There was a written record of those decisions. And then other judges in the area and the surrounding areas would start reading those decisions and say, hey, that was a good way to handle that. I think I want to handle the going forward, I'm going to handle things the same way. And that's where we started getting that idea of precedent. If another court makes a decision, nowadays, as we fast forward to a higher court, if a higher court makes a decision, then the lower courts follow that decision. They follow that precedent. The higher courts set precedent, and the lower courts follow the precedent. The idea of this, the doctrine that says that higher courts can make decisions that lower courts have to follow, is a doctrine where you use a Latin term. We're going to use a lot of Latin terms in this course, to be honest. But the Latin term for the doctrine that says that higher courts make decisions and lower courts follow them is called stare decisis. The doctrine of stare decisis says just that. If you're a lower court and a higher court has already made a decision that aligns with this case, then the lower court should follow that decision. They should follow that precedent, follow that example, if you will. So we have a couple different kinds of ideas of court worldwide. We in America, because of the Old English historical precedent we have what we would call an adversarial system as opposed to an inquisitorial system. The adversarial system says that there are, just kind of like what the name says, adversarial. There's two competing interests in our American court system. The competing interests are the prosecution or the government and the defense team, the defendant, the person being charged. So, and because we are an adversarial system, then both of them are given an opportunity to have those competing interests to be heard, as opposed to a one-sided court case, an inquisitorial system, which in days gone by was a little bit more popular than it is today in the world. This adversarial system gives the prosecution a chance to try to explain why they think the defendant, the person being charged, is guilty, and if they want, then the defense team, the defendant, can try to show why they think they're not guilty. But there's nothing that says they have to. Only the prosecution has to prove the case. We hear that there's a presumption of innocence in America, and it's true. There's a presumption of innocence. So if the prosecution doesn't necessarily make a good argument as to why the defendant is guilty, there's nothing that says that the prosecution's resting point, and which would normally be the defense's kicking off point, has to occur. The defense could rest immediately, saying the prosecution never proved their case. We have nothing to say. Now, I'm not saying that's a very popular decision, but in theory, that could happen. Remember, the presumption of innocence means that the prosecution is the only one who has to prove a case. The defense just has to disprove the prosecution's case. And the last thing I want to talk about is where we get our authority for courts. The authority, this is just something to remember for pretty much the entirety of this class. Article 3 of the Constitution gives the courts their authority. We have Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 that cover the executive branch, legislative branch, and the judicial branch, not necessarily in that order. But Article 3 is the one that handles the judicial branch and gives judges and courts in general the authority to do the business that they do. So that kind of covers the opening materials in chapters 1 and 2. Make sure you take care of the assignments and make sure that you check in the modules to see what is due. There should be some links there, and make sure they are accomplished by the due date that's listed. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I will talk to you guys soon.